Hi, I'm Ed Carmack. This topic in our ODS report writing training deals with retrieving data from the ODS database that we can use to create a report. This is the first and most important step in report writing because, after all, a report is only useful if the data in it is complete and accurate. So first we'll look at a simple example of how to select records from a single ODS table and place those records into an Excel spreadsheet. Then from there you should know how to use Excel to sort or count or summarize the data to suit your particular need. Then in the next topic we'll get a little more realistic by expanding our query to use multiple tables. Now, there are many ways to select records from a database, but we'll do it using a program called Microsoft Query in conjunction with Microsoft Excel. So let's begin. First, we'll start Excel just as you normally do. Once Excel has started, then we want to connect to our ODS data source. We do that by going to the Data tab, clicking that, and then click under the External Data grouping. We want to select from other sources. And from that drop down, we want to select from Microsoft Query. Now clicking that begins Microsoft Query, and we see here a list of data sources. Now Microsoft Query has an annoying habit of minimizing itself whether you ask it to or not. And so if that should happen to you, then you just drop down to your taskbar and find it and maximize it again. So here's the Microsoft Query window, and we're going to use this to tell Microsoft Query which records we want to select and put into the spreadsheet. So our data source that we'll use is the ODS data source that we've configured, and so we'll select that, and it's going to ask us to log in. So we'll type in our user ID and password that we use to access any of our colleague forms and click OK. And now we see the Query Wizard window which says Choose Columns, and I have two windows here. The first one on the left says Available Tables and Columns. Those are the tables that we can choose from, and then we're going to select from that and put the data fields that we want to select over into this window that says Columns in your query. Now there are a lot of different tables that are in this listing, and of course there are only certain ones that we want to select from. So in order to pare down this list to something a little bit more manageable, I can click the Options button, and under Table Options we want to change the owner from All to DBO and click OK. And that will reduce the number of tables that appear in the Available Tables list. And the tables that we want to use are named ODS something. So any table in the list that starts with ODS is a table that we can use in our queries. So I'll scroll down to a table that I'd like to use, and I think I'll use, for this example, ODS room assignments. And so I find that table, and I now can select that. If I just select it by clicking on it, and then click the arrow that points to the right, it will take all of the data fields that are in the room assignments table, and it will place them over here in the query window where we could include those in our report. If I wanted to move data fields from the columns in your query window and take them out, then I can use the double arrow button and it will move them all back. I can also select individual data fields from the room assignments table by clicking the plus sign just to the left of the table name and expand that so that it shows the individual data fields within that table, and then I can select them one by one and move them over into my query window. But I think I'll just go ahead for the time being and just select all of the data elements so that I can just see them all. Now if I do nothing more, if I specify no further criteria, just that I want to see these data elements, and I click all the way through to the end of the query wizard, we'll see what happens. I'm just going to click on through until we get to the Finish button and click. Now I have two options. One option says return data to Microsoft Excel. the other says View Data or Edit Query in Microsoft Query. Now, I think before I commit all of this data to Microsoft Excel, I think I'll look at it first, and so I'll select the second option, View Data or Edit Query in Microsoft Query, and then click Finish. And then what I see is all the data fields in this table, and I see the data that's as it's stored in each of those data fields for all the records that are in that table. Now, one reason for doing this is that if you're not totally familiar with the table and how the information is stored in it, you can do something like this to very quickly just get a look at the data and see what you need to know about how the data is actually placed in there. So as I look at this data, I just want to glance at it and be sure that I understand what each of the data elements are and how the information is represented in each of the data elements. The first data element that is here is called Room Assignment ID, and that is the primary key for this table. It doesn't contain any useful information because these are not actual room numbers. These are just row numbers for this particular table. The room number itself is contained over in a data element called RMAS room. So that's probably the one I'm going to want to include on my report. I also have data elements here for the building. There's a 4-character building code, and I need to be sure that I'm aware of that and what those codes are. And there's also a term, RMAS term, which represents the term that this assignment is being made. It has a RMAS person ID, which is the colleague number for each of the people assigned rooms, and then there are some dates and other information here that I'm not so interested in at this point. And so this is all of the data in the table. Maybe I want to produce a report that shows me the rooms that have been assigned in, say, Swanson Hall. And so I want to write a query that will select out only those records. So I'm going to start over on a new query. I'm just going to close this down. I'm not going to save it, and I'm going to start over with a new query from the ODS tables. And I'm going to have to enter my credentials again and then select the table that I want. And again, I can reduce the number of tables by changing the owner. And I want to go down to ODS room assignments, and there it is. And this time I'm going to just select the individual data elements that I want to include in my report. And so that I will want the building. I'll also want to know the room number. I want to know the person that's assigned to that room, and I want to know the term for which the room is assigned. Okay, so there are my data elements. And so now I want to set the filter rules, which will allow me to select out only those rooms that are assigned for Swanson Hall. And so Swanson is a building, and so I want to set rules pertaining to the RMAS building field. So I want the values in RMAS building to be equal to the code for Swanson Hall. And so what you've seen here is that we select the data element that we want to set criteria for, and then we have operators which we can use, equals, greater than, less than, and so forth. In this case, we want it to be the value that's in the building field to be equal to, and then I have a drop-down list that I can pick one of the dorm codes for. Some fields may require that we type in a value rather than select from a list. That's the main filter criteria we want. We only want rooms for Swanson Hall. So we'll click Next. Now we have the option of telling the query wizard how we want to order our result set, or the records that we retrieve. We can leave them unordered and just in the order that they come, or we can sort them in some way. And so I think I'll sort my list by room number so that I'll have records that I retrieve will be all for Swanson Hall, but they'll be ordered by room number. And then I can either select ascending or descending, meaning I can start with the highest room number and sort down, or I can start with the lowest room number and move up in the list. Lastly, again, I have to select whether I want to return this data to Microsoft Excel or view it in Microsoft Query, and I generally always view it in Query first just to be sure that I've got what I'm looking for, and click Finish. So here's my result set. These are the records and they're properly sorted. We'll notice that they're all for 2014 fall, and the reason for that is that 2014 fall are the only records that we happen to have in the ODS at this point in time. Later, when we get more data in the system, then we'll need to filter out terms that we're not interested in, so that if we only wanted 2014 fall, we would have to use that as a selection criteria in our filtering. So that's how we retrieve the records, and now if we like what we have, then we would just go up here to File and select Return Data to Microsoft Excel and create a table, and then we could save that table to our desktop. And now we can take that data and we can work with it, format it in whatever way we want to. So this is a very simple example about retrieving data from a single table. In the next session, we'll be looking at how to do the same thing with multiple tables.